Thank you so much for having me. This is an out-of-body experience. Never in my lifetime that I thought I'd have this opportunity to address you all. It's been a long time coming, and first of all, I want to say how proud I am of what this union's done on the Verizon strike. I can't tell you. I can't tell you how much that means for the rest of the country. There have been so few mass strikes, so few successful strikes, and that you pulled this one off is a shot in the arm for all of us. Thank you again. There's a long list of people that I should thank for being here today. Obviously, Chris for having the faith and giving me some airtime here, and all the support he's provided, George Cole, and my day-to-day partner in crime, Margarita Hernandez, who's done a spectacular job. Shane for steering this ship, but also I need to thank Bob Masters, who believed in us, believed in me, believed that this education, for 40 years he's believed that the labor movement needs this, and I think we finally launched something that's going to make a big difference, and I'm going to share that with you today. So thank you, Bob. Okay. Here we go. I know how hard you work. I know how much you do as labor activists on a day-by-day basis. It is not an easy job. It's one of the toughest jobs in the country. But as hard as you're working, as much as you do, I'm here to tell you, you're going to have to do more. You're going to have to do more because of the movement building that you've heard everybody talking about this morning. That movement building is going to require more. So what I'm going to do with you real briefly this morning is I'm going to take you into the valley of despair. I'm going to show you what we're up against. And then I hope to help you and me get out of that valley of despair and share with you why Chris is right, why this is the most amazing moment in our lifetimes, and we have to seize upon it. So let's start. All right. First question we're going to deal with is how rich are these people who are running this country? If you ask the average American, they'll say the wage gap is roughly 45 to 1. Roughly, that's what the polling shows, which is what it was in 1970. Now think about that number. What it means is for every $1 earned by the average worker, a CEO, a top 100 CEO would earn $45. So that means if you could afford one car, they could afford 45. If you could afford one home, they could afford 45 homes. That's a heck of a gap. That's what it was in 1970. Watch this. The latest number we have is 844 to 1. 844 to 1. It's hard to imagine one home for you and 844 for them. There's a reason you had the public on your side in winning the Verizon strike, because people are starting to sense that maybe their 45 to 1 isn't right. Maybe it's worse. So how did it get here? Well, let's find out. Hold on. There we go. I'll get the technology down. The numbers are actually 30 million for an average top 100 CEO, just like your top ones in the telecommunication industry, 38,000 for the average worker. I hope you're doing better than that, but sounds like some of you are not. Okay, so here's where the problem starts. This is a chart of productivity in the United States. Those of you who've heard this rap from me, I beg your patience. We're going to do it again. It's been rising since 1947. And productivity is defined, it's a bad word we hear all the time at work, but it's defined how much we produce per hour of labor. It has nothing to do with the cost of labor, just per hour, how much output per hour. And as you can see, America has been very productive, thanks to us, all the way from 1947 until today. The next picture, next line, is the average real wage taking into account inflation. This is like $2,012. And you can see from 1947 till the mid-1970s, when productivity rose, so did real wages. I was in graduate school when those two lines were hooked together, and they told us it was an iron law. It had to happen. As the economy, productivity grew, your wages would grow automatically. No sooner did I graduate, they repealed the law. Gone. Our wages actually, on average, have gone down. And think about your take-home pay for a second. Think about it. You know, see that number on your check or in your bank account? Double it. That's what it should be if the iron law had continued. It should be double what it is today. Double. Just think about what your standard of living would be like. Didn't happen. So we have to understand this is a big phenomenon. Why did these two lines pull apart? Well, there was a great study done by the International Labor Organization and a labor-oriented group of a bunch of economists in Switzerland, based in Switzerland, and they tried to figure out what the exact causes were. And they said about 10% of the problem was automation, new technology. Wow, I thought it was a lot more than that, but they said 10%. They said about 20% was globalization. Geez, I thought, you know, everyone says that's the big problem. Then they said, come on, 25%, now we're getting someplace, were attacks on labor and cutbacks in social spending, the government, social programs. But then here was the ringer. They came up with another thing called financialization, 45%. Now, I'd written 2 books about finance at this point when I saw the study, and I didn't know what financialization really was. In this study, it was defined as those countries that had the largest Wall Street operation had the most inequality. Oh, what does that mean? So now that was a clue. Let's take a look at that. Well, here's a chart. Looks a lot like our other one. The bottom line, the purple line, are wages in the non-financial sector, where most of us work. And the top line are wages in the financial sector. And lo and behold, the two tracked together. Didn't matter whether you worked in finance or in manufacturing. You got paid about the same on average. And then all of a sudden, around 1980, there's this huge jump. Enormous. And look, so now we have the two charts look the same. So something big happened. You don't see something like this in economic history unless something really big happened. And in this case, bad. So what was it? Well, your senior economist who just recently retired, Ken Perez, in the 1980s came up with an explanation, although he didn't know it was an explanation for this at the time. He called it the Better Business Climate Model. Academics call it neoliberalism. What it was a new philosophy ripped through the academic community, ripped through the policy establishment, and captured both political parties in the late 70s. And it was simple, and you'll hear it today from almost every politician. Cut taxes, cut regulations, cut back government social spending, and you can attack unions on the side, make sure you don't coddle them in any way, and that's going to lead people to want to go out and work hard. You get profits going up, investment goes up, and then all boats would rise. This is what was sold to us. A lot of people call it trickle down. But the real problem of this, the dirty little secret of this was when you deregulate something, if you break up Ma Bell, that's one thing. When you deregulate Wall Street, that's another thing. The dirty little secret was the deregulation of Wall Street turned our economy inside out. Let me show you real briefly how that happened. First thing that happened was, don't laugh, that's a relative of mine. I still have my hair. Okay, so a group of people, once this deregulation started, a group of people that we call corporate raiders, now they're called hedge funds and private equity companies, they got the green light to go buy up companies. Virtually every company that is represented in this room has been bought up in the last 20, 30 years, every company. And what they did, the trick they did was they used borrowed money to buy it up. They put a little bit of their own, borrowed a huge amount, and then bought the company. Now, how many people here have bought a car with a car loan? Who pays back the loan, you or the car? See, you're buying the wrong thing. If you buy a company, the company pays back the loan. They stick all those loans on top of the company. And then what they do is, as soon as they do that, they take a little special dividend off the top, put it into their pocket, no big deal. They give some to the bankers and the CEO, and then they make the company pay it all back. Well, obviously, this was a great formula for milking companies. We call it financial strip mining. And what happened was, in order to do this, if you're going to be a strip miner, you need a boss man. You need somebody watching the operation for you day in and day out, making sure you're taking the minerals, the wealth, out of the ground, and that the money ends up in the investor's pocket. So that's boss man is the CEO. So they had to change the way the CEO was paid. So from like 1980 on, they had to be in the pocket of the corporate raider or the hedge fund, the private equity company. They had to align their interests, it's called in economics. Well, here's how they did it. They started paying them with stock incentives. At the beginning, very little, this is in millions, of the top 500 CEOs, there was just a little bit, and then more, and then more. And now the average top 500 CEO gets almost $10 million a year in stock incentives. That's just the start of it, though. In 1980, 95% of a CEO's pay were salary and bonuses, 5% were stock incentives. Here's what it is today. 5% salary and bonuses, off the charts. 90% stock incentives. So now think about it. If you are a CEO and you're paid with stock incentives, what would you do? As a matter of fact, what is the corporation about if that's how the top people get paid? What it means is you're no longer making a product. You're now making a stock price, because the only way they get paid is if their stock goes up. So that becomes the name of the game in every corporation, in every corner of this country. And the way they did it was incredibly devious. What they did was they figured out, well, we'll use all our cash flow to buy back the shares of our company. And if we buy back the shares, we end up boosting the price. We reduce the ownership, the number of owners. Like imagine two of us that owned a $1 million company. You have a share, $500,000 your share. My share is $500,000. I buy you out. There's one share left. It's now worth $1 million. This works with millions of shares as well. So they figured out, wow, we should buy back our own shares. Well, before 1982, this was illegal. It was called stock manipulation. Duh. Yeah, you're manipulating the price of the stock. So they got a rule change under the Reagan administration, and off they went. So back in 1981, 2% of profits, all corporate profits, went to stock buybacks. Before the crash, it was 75% of all corporate profits went to stock buybacks. Think about what that means. 75% of all corporate profits go to stock buybacks. That's what your company is about. It's about getting cash flow to buy back their own shares. That's what you do every day. You create cash flow so they can buy back their own shares. Well, now all the obvious things fall out from this. That's why you downsize through layoffs. That's why you ship production abroad. That's why you sell off product lines and divisions. That's why you speed up production. That's why you raid pension funds. That's why you had to go on strike against Verizon. And that's why you're going to have to take United on. Look at every one of these companies. They've done billions of dollars in stock buybacks. All right. That's not good. This has to be changed. All right. So this leads now to 4 methods of strip mining. Interest payments on the massive debt that they've accumulated. Oh, by the way, when they run out of profits, guess what they do to get more money to buy back their own shares? They borrow it. They load it more money onto debt onto the company. So they keep loading up debt onto the company. They give the fees to the banks, the special dividends to the corporate raiders, and the stock buybacks. This is financial strip mining. This is how the money goes from us to them, and why those 2 lines fell apart and our wages basically went flat when you count inflation for the last 30 years, except for union members who are lucky enough to have something like the CWA behind them. Okay, the outcomes are obvious. Real wages stagnate, financial and CEO income skyrocket, good jobs and benefits decline. All right, very briefly, this has an enormous impact on the public sector and our communities. First of all, how many people here have a mortgage? What's nice about the interest payments on your mortgage? All that debt on corporations, tax deductible. They stop paying taxes. Look at the debt on corporations. There were almost no debt until the deregulation began. Now there's nearly $8 trillion. Forget about the government debt. The corporate debt, they're not paying taxes. Here's their tax percent rates. corporations' tax rates have fallen in half. This is what they're paying to state and local government. So your state and local government is squeezed. This helps answer the question of how can the richest country in the world, the history of the world, not afford a decent public sector? How can you have somebody go to dental school and end up with $300,000 in debt? Well, we don't have the tax money to support that. Oh, and by the way, wealthy people don't pay their taxes either. The richer you get, the less that you leave your money on shore. You've heard about the Panama Papers that just were revealed. All these dummy corporations set up to protect money that gets offshore. About $150 billion in taxes we're leaving through that. We've got a list of it state by state. You can get this material later. As a result, we now have a perfectly regressive tax system. Not progressive, regressive. The people who are poorer or the people who are richer pay a smaller percentage than the people who are poor. Perfectly, this is state and local taxes. So there's no money there. The rich have kept it. The corporations aren't paying. You're tapped out. You're paying as much as possible. Hence, we have a collapsing public sector. Despair. Hold on. There's more coming. Once the corporations and the wealthy get a lot of money, they spend it on politics, right? This is in the last election cycle, this is what was spent by labor, about $54 million. Single issues like environment, $71 million. And now corporations and finance, it's a lot of money. And give you one more before I move on here. We're talking about the TPP. The other thing that happens is when these Wall Street institutions are so rich, the temptation to kiss their butts if you're a federal official is tremendous because you can get a job there. Instead of making $100,000 a year, God forbid, you don't want to live just on $100,000, how about a couple of million or more? Michael Froman, ever hear of him? Michael Froman led the charge in the Clinton administration to get rid of Glass-Steagall, allowing the big banks to become mega banks. He got rid of the most important New Deal piece of legislation, another piece of deregulation. Okay, when he was done there, he leaves and goes to Citigroup. His job at Citigroup is to press for trade provisions that would further deregulate Citigroup. Then he leaves Citigroup with a $4.5 million bonus and goes where? He goes to the Obama administration to become the chief TPP negotiator, pushing for regulations that still help Citigroup thrive and prosper around the world. This is a revolving door, and it happens on issue after issue after issue. It's like we train them in government, then they go do some, make their big money in Wall Street, come back and forth and back and forth. All right. This is bad stuff. It gets worse. But I promise you, this is the last bit of worse. It leads to a new social philosophy, and it basically is this. If you want an education, go into debt, as the brother so eloquently pointed out. If you're poor, you're on your own. Fend for yourself. If you want a job, go find it. If you don't have one, it's your fault. Forget about government. When was the last time you heard a government official said, we are going to spend money to create public jobs for the unemployed? When was the last time you heard that? Who's got the guts to say that now? Oh, no. That's a violation of the Better Business Climate philosophy. And if you want a poverty program, go to jail. Because when this philosophy hit, the Better Business Climate hit, they gave up on the whole war on poverty. That was out the window. Support for inner city youth, forget it, gone. Support for Appalachia, forget it, gone. You want that kind of support, you go to prison. Think I'm kidding? Watch this. Here's student debt. Almost very little in the, well, when I went to school in the 60s, it was virtually zero. New York State, the whole system was free. California, the whole system was free. You had a summer job, you could go to a state school. I went to an expensive private school. You know what my student debt was? I hate to say this to the brother who was up here. $60 a month for 10 years. 60 a month. 6-0. Even I could afford that, working for the kind of grants and stuff that Bob Master got for me. All right, so up we went. Now, it's over $1.2 trillion industry. Wall Street wants us to stay indebted, wants our kids and our families to stay indebted for obvious reasons. Now, here's our solution to youth unemployment. do we have one? This is the number of young people, high school graduates, 17 to 20 years old, African Americans, youth, who are unemployed or severely underemployed, 51%. Latino, 36%. Anglo, 33%. You would think we'd want to do something about this. What have we done? Zero. Nothing. Here's the program we've put in. I'm going to show you the prison population in the United States, starting in 1910. Note, the number of prisoners is pretty steady all the way to 1980. Watch this. Now watch what happens as inequality hits. We have the most prisoners in the entire world, both in absolute number and as a percentage of our population, more than North Korea, China, Russia, Cuba, Venezuela, all the people that we can point to and say, oh, they have totalitarian governments. We have more prisoners. That's our war on poverty. And what's worse, well, look, there's financial wages rising. Isn't that interesting? If we had more time, we could dig into why that happened. But one of the results is it's also color-coded. Back in the year, this is the number of African-American young males who were in prison as a percentage, and here Anglos. And you can see there was a gap always, but now there's an enormous gap. There's a reason why the Black Lives Matter movement exists, why African-American youth are so upset about being channeled virtually into prison. Now, one more little piece. You heard of Ferguson, Missouri? And Michael Brown, who was killed there? Ferguson, Missouri has a policy to raise a certain amount of money from what they call fines and forfeitures, arresting people for traffic violations and small stuff, get them into court, make them pay the fees. And it was about 8% of their budget came from fines and forfeitures. Well, when the financial crash hit and their revenues from wealthier people and the corporations in town were collapsing, they had a bright idea. Let's raise more money from the poor people in our town. Let's arrest them. So they doubled the amount of money that they wanted to get from fines and forfeitures, and Michael Brown got caught up into that net. So there was an economic incentive to keep arresting people like Michael Brown, and sure enough, one of them got killed. All right, now, what do we do about this? There's been a lot of talk about this already here, but let me give you two takeaways from this wrap. First one is, runaway inequality will not cure itself. There is no magic pendulum swinging back and forth in the economy that's going to go from more inequality to less inequality. There's no mechanistic way this is happening. We are in the eighth year of economic growth, and 95% of that growth has gone to the top 1%. Heaven help us in the next recession. So it is not going to fix itself, and this leads us to the second conclusion, which is it's going to take a massive popular movement to counter runaway inequality. That's why you're hearing this from Chris and others. We have to build this movement, and I want to just spend a few moments on what that actually means. What we have right now are a bunch of, there you guys are, CWA on strike. We've got Black Lives Matter. We've got the People's Climate March. We've got the Fight for 15. This union's doing everything it can to kind of bring those together, but mostly they're separate. They're in their silos. And to build a movement, we have to kind of figure out how to bring this, yes, really together, so that it's not just I'll support you, you support me. It's that this is what we all want. That's what a movement looks like. Bernie was starting to get us there. Now, we've done this once before in the 1880s. Small farmers, black and white, were furious at Wall Street, and they organized a movement called the Populist Movement, and they were incredibly bold. They went around the country, and they were demanding cooperatives. They were demanding public banks. By the way, they got one, Bank of North Dakota. They were demanding public ownership of railroads, telegraph, telephone. They didn't get that, but by the time of the New Deal, they got tremendous regulations. They wanted progressive income tax. They won that. They won a lot of stuff. And now we're building an agenda that's very similar to that. 3 minutes, perfect. I won't even go into the agenda. I'll let Shane do that. What I will do, they had an organizing strategy, educate and organize, and when they were done doing that, they organized and educated. They had 6,000 educators going around the country. There's a reason we want Dennis Dunn to go around the country doing this. We need 30,000 to match that, given the size of the population. So there are 4 things we need to do to build a movement. I'm going to leave you with that if they don't put the hook on me. We need a common agenda and a common analysis, and we're getting close to that. Bernie Sanders field tested, I think, a common agenda, and you heard Chris talking about it in his introductory remarks. So we're very close to having that. We need an educational infrastructure, and CWA, God bless you, put up $1 million to build that educational infrastructure, and it's spreading. We now have groups in, union groups in New Jersey, in the state of Washington, in New York State that are building their own train-the-trainer models using the same material that CWA helped to develop. So this thing could really spread. I think we can build the educational infrastructure. That's my pay grade. The next pay grade up, though, is someone has got to build a new national movement. We need something like a progressive alliance where we could go to a meeting anywhere in the country, Pensacola or Patterson, Pasadena, and walk in there and we'd be part of the same organization demanding an end to runaway inequality. We can do this. That's it. We have the capacity to build organizations. We can't let another moment like Occupy Wall Street happen and then it disappears in 6 months. We actually can build and sustain an ongoing movement. But that requires one last thing that I leave you with. We need a new activist identity, the kind that Dennis Dunn was talking about. We need to become silo busters, movement building. It's our heads that are holding us back. We need to be able to add another identity to the ones that we already have as union activists, union militant, environmentalists, whatever. We have to become movement builders. If there ever was a group of people, a union that can do this, it's you. You can do this. I can't tell you again how proud I am to be here. What we do, and normally when we do this around the country, and by the way, the CWA has me moving so much that I can't even remember where I am half the time, the one thing we need to build is an army of educators. When I ask this question, usually 95% of the people volunteer every time. People want to do this. So I leave you with this thought. Now is the time. There'll never be a moment as good as this. We should build this broad-based populist alliance as soon as we can. First task, defeat Trump. And a good reason for defeating Trump is because we can build this movement better if he's not around than if he is around. But I ask you this. I ask you to think long and hard about supporting your union's effort to build this movement. All of us here have to become movement makers, silo busters. Please, we're never going to get a chance like this again, and that is the most hopeful thing I can possibly say. You can do it. Thank you very much.